Yes,
Gatekeeper, here we are, 10 o'clock. Ta-da! Everybody, give yourself a big hand for Sunday. You've made it. I think everybody's energy is a little bit higher than what I'm used to seeing. Sometimes on Sundays, people start to drag a little bit, but everybody seems a little bit up.
Well, I'm dragging, but I just caffeine.
Yeah.
Isn't that what caffeine's for?
Yeah. So anyway, welcome to the panel, The Future of the Automobile. My name is MileHiCon. I'm the moderator, and we will go from Aaron across, and you introduce yourselves.
All right. So my name is Dr. Erin McDonald. I have a background in general relativity and gravitational waves. I am not a sci-fi author, but I help authors with doing consulting on some of their technology with respect to gravity and faster than light travel. And I work as a systems engineer with Stellar Solutions here in Denver.
My name is Bill Cherf. I am an author. I write historical science fiction and extremely contemporary urban fantasy. I am also a card-carrying member of the National Autosport Association. I have driven wheel to wheel for about 5 years, and currently my wife and I share a Z06 Corvette on weekends, and we go tearing around. So guess what side of the argument I'm on?
I don't know, it sounds like your car flies, so I'm not sure.
It does.
I'm Brian Thomas Schmidt. I am a author of, actually, this series, the series of Saga of Dobby Rehaz Flying Cars. It's Space Opera Series. This is book 2. They're out from Wordfire. And I am the author of an official canon X-Files story that just came out, and X-Files Secret Agendas. Both of those are in the dealer room. And I am an editor, mostly known as an editor, Hugo-nominated editor. I have edited anthologies for Bain Books and St. Martin's Press and Titan Books, among others, on everything from space colonization to the future of space travel in a post-NASA age to future Olympics and military fantasy as well. I'm also writing a near-future police procedural, and I'm a book editor. I've edited books like, well, the most famous thing I edited was The Martian. I edited that before it ever sold for Andy Weir. And I've edited books for Todd McCaffrey and Alan Dean Foster and people like that. So.
Good, great. Well, like I said, my name is MileHiCon. I'm probably the most famous in very small lowercase letters for writing the Felix Gomez Vampire Detective series. And I have a story coming out in Cyber World, and we have a panel today at, I think it's at 2 o'clock in Mesa Verde C, where we'll be talking about the, it's a pre-book launch talk about they'll have several of the authors there and that. So please, show up there. All right, so we're going to be talking about the future of the automobile beyond flying cars, and to me, it's like we are actually living in the future that everybody was talking about. I mean, because all this stuff, and the challenge is for particularly a lot of writers, in particular if you're writing near future, is that you'll write about something, and then within a couple of years, things have outpaced that. Or if we look back in our own the canon of science fiction stories, we have technologies today. The cell phone's probably the most common. Things that were not even, didn't even register. I mean, they had devices, but the way we think about a cell phone with the apps and texting and all that was something that really kind of escaped people. And so I think with the cars, it's one. And to me, it's that we are on the verge of having robotic vehicles on the road. And I think Budweiser, 2 weeks ago, did a first test run of having a robotic truck drive a delivery of Budweiser beer of all things. It's futuristic beer, right? Budweiser. and so we have that. And there's a concern now because the largest segment in our economy deals with transportation. So now that is going to be completely reinvented. What are the consequences to that, right? And I think we could do. And then now we're talking about robotic Uber cars. So how is that going to affect things? And I think maybe from there we can go on maybe to the George Jetson flying cars thing, because I think that is still kind of, I think whatever big changes happen with this new big change in cars is going to affect us before flying cars, come to be, if they ever do. So we will start with our Dr. Scientist here. See, what do you think?
Well, there's so many problems that need to be solved in order to get to even just the automation of the cars. I mean, we've had that tragic accident that happened where, you know, I think it was the Tesla?
Yeah, it was a Tesla.
That was self-driving, and the person behind the wheel died because the car couldn't distinguish the white background of the sky with the semi-truck that was also white. And so there's a lot of problems that need to be solved, and from a purely just data technical standpoint, I think there are ways to get through it and ways to get over it, but it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and unfortunately that error comes with quite a high risk. And so I think when it comes to the self-driving, we're nearly there, but it's going to take us mentally to make a big shift for that. And I think for any of us, myself included, if I get a car, if I get a self-driving car, I will look at all of the specs and how it's doing it and what algorithms it's doing, and I will still sit there with my hands on the wheel as much as possible.
Well, before I pass the baton around, is that I have read where every time they get somebody in one of these robotic cars and they test them, everybody's exactly that way for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then they start kicking back. They're like, this thing can drive itself. You know? So I think that anxiety level will fall really, really quickly.
Apologies, folks,
Okay.
we have
That's
an
okay.
elevator stuck for
Let me move this.
I was in that elevator. I would have gotten out, but I was way in the back. Sorry.
Move this chair out of the way for him.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, your deal. I mean, here he comes.
Thank you.
You got room right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you, once you get situated there, please introduce yourself for our audience. And welcome. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, guys.
I'm Al Neil Smith, and I guess that says that I'm all through around 35 years, I kind of lost count.
Okay.
He also is the special recipient of the Lifetime Prometheus Award.
Yay.
Yeah.
Special guest.
Probably best known for my first novel, which means I've wasted the last 35 years, The Probability Approach, which is sort of regarded as the definitive libertarian novel. And I also write some nonfiction. I write a lot of political columns.
He's written Lando Calrissian books for the Star Wars series,
Oh, yeah.
which
So-
I read as a kid. So.
So we were just going down the table. I guess it's your turn next to talk about what your first thoughts about this next wave of the robotic cars that are coming about. Some of your thoughts.
I thought about this really seriously, believe it or not. I can see robotic cars on main thoroughfares like I-25, I-70, because the conditions are relatively, I can't say this, but I'm going to say it, relatively simple in comparison to trying to get an Uber car cooking around an urban environment with all the possibilities of what's going on, not to mention the fact that the buildings are going to block signals, you see. Because I'm assuming, daringly, please correct me, that a lot of this data is going to reside in the cloud. I can't imagine a car holding enough terabytes to be able to do it on the ground. So I can see very easily the main thoroughfares. For instance, just recently my wife and I drove to Seattle from Denver. What a lovely trip it was. But it would have been much easier if I could have, hit the button on the Acadia and kicked back and enjoyed the scenery instead of turning 20 hours into something grueling. So I can see where it would make a lot of sense there. But let's face it, we're in the West, aren't we? There's a lot of people who do off-roading. We have farmers, we have ranchers, we have a lot of dirt roads. I would be very surprised if autonomous vehicles would really do well in such environments. I could be proven wrong. After all, we have Mars rovers, right, don't we? So I think the first place where it will be applied will be with the semis. So when they make a mistake, it's catastrophic. And people then suddenly rethink and make things even better. But that's just my opinion. Obviously, I'm a gearhead, I'm an auto freak. There will be an element, I think, throughout my lifetime at least, of people who do enjoy the adrenaline rush of racing. And autonomous just is anathema to that. So those are my 2 cents.
I spent a lot of time on this for my near future police thing, and one of the things I learned actually about semis is many of them now have a system that not only tracks the truck, but keeps it on a certain schedule, and also will coordinate with other trucks. So the trucks can basically self-drive to a degree in line with each other and react to things first to help the driver get brake here and there and things. So we've got some of that technology, not every semi-line is using it obviously, but they do have that. Now the police, the interesting thing about the police and these auto-driving cars is the problem with auto-driving cars is they don't have the same reactions as everybody else. They are obviously programmed to be polite and good drivers, okay? When they're dealing with really aggressive drivers, like out in California and various places, or with me, the reality of it is they're very easy to trick into getting into accidents. And they're also, you know, the advantage for the police tech guy said, you know, the advantage of it is officers can have hands-free to do other things they need to do, and to focus and look for suspects and do different things that they might not be able to do as they drive as well. But the problem is, you know, you gotta be able to trust your vehicle to react instantly to any situation that you have to deal with. And so the technology's not quite up to standards with some of that, and they definitely, you know, wouldn't be doing a high-speed chase with a car driving itself either. So, I mean, I think there are certainly lots of those issues that definitely have to be worked out. But until we get AI technology that is, you know, Terminator style thinking for itself, I think we're kind of gonna see a lot of these limitations.
Right, Neil?
I am unwilling to trust my safety on the highway to Bill Gates. And I think the idea with automated police cars having been a cop is horrible. I think these auto-driving cars are bad, that will go away. The way to cut down on traffic congestion, that sort of thing, is to get highway speeds up. I predict the probability approach that at this point in time, if it weren't for the fact that the highways are government controlled, we'd be up to 300 miles an hour. One of the things I'd like to do is get rid of wheels. I designed highways that are that shape and cross section, and I run hovercraft down at 300 miles an hour. We need to let the technology improve the way it should have. Most people don't know that general aviation, for example, hasn't changed a whit since the 1930s. And automobile traffic is not that far behind. We have bigger, slicker looking cars and they have more cup holders. But cars need a basic change in technology. I love cars, and there will never be a substitute for a way to go from exactly where you are at exactly the time you want to go to exactly the destination you want. There will never be a substitute for that. The empty bus company won't do it, and even Uber won't do it. I see people using Uber, they seem to be very happy with that, but that's the basic, you know, human driver in a car.
Well, yeah, it's some good points. I think, to me, some of the other things is, you were just talking about like the transportation aspect of it, but there's a lot more to it. For example, to me, is that you get in this car, in this service, one thing that is seldom talked about in the future experiences is how are these things how much do these things cost? Like in Star Trek, nobody pays for medical insurance. So now you have this car, and something that the people think about, for example, in Oregon, if you drive, as I understand it, you drive a hybrid or an electric car, you have to pay an additional tax because you're not paying road tax when you buy gasoline, okay? So that difference has to come from somewhere. So this future car, which I kind of see as like an Uber thing, I need a car here, you use the app, it shows up. That's going to cost you something. The other thing too is that in all cities, the revenue from traffic violations is a significant revenue stream. So you have these robotic cars that are very polite, that are not going to get tickets. The cities, for example, Chicago, depends like $40 million a year on revenue from traffic violations. And if that doesn't happen, that's a huge shortfall. So you're going to have to pay. So basically, every time you get in a car, you'll be paying for traffic ticket violations, you know, that revenue, that part of it. I'm also thinking about crime, getaway cars in the future. You know, if they're robotic cars, how's that going to work?
As long as the cops are in a robotic car and it has limited speed, I guess you could really just keep ahead of them.
That part of it, no, is the part of it is like they know where you are all the time.
And
So how
the
can
people
you,
to shut your engine off, too.
Well,
yeah, they can shut your engine off and then there's
Yeah.
that part of it. And then who owns this car?
Yeah.
If it's a Google, this thing is nothing but an information collection device.
Yeah.
It's going to use data, facial recognition to know who's in the car. Obviously, who's ever the primary driver is paying, so, you know, that all, your phone and your bank account is all synced in.
Well, if they have to use the GPS data, then their car ultimately is sending signals out and can be tracked too. So,
Right,
I mean,
right.
There's no
Well,
way
that part-
around that.
And the other thing I was reading about these robotic cars is that a limitation is the bandwidth. These cars are sending a tremendous amount of energy, and it's working on their test tracks because they have the antennas and things. So that's something else that has to be built, is this infrastructure, because these cars are basically AI,
Yeah.
and they are constantly updating the data on the master data grid, on road conditions, in the environment, and they're also communicating to one another. So there's a tremendous amount of information that's going around, and how secure is it going to be?
Here's another problem that we haven't even talked about. You know, the automobile industry is huge business. It's very unionized, all right? Every change they make to production affects jobs. The reason that some of the technology takes so long to change in industries like the aviation industry and other things has a lot to do with how it's going to affect jobs, how it's going to affect economy. There's a lot of investment in this parts and the various suppliers and various things, and not all of them want to see change because they want to keep getting the money and doing what they're doing, what they've been doing for however many years. That is going to be a factor in how things develop with automobiles. It has been in fuel efficiency. It has been in environmental consciousness about emissions. Those have been a factor in all of these things that we've been fighting out or talking about for a long time, some of which are finally happening and some of which still are not. So I think that's going to play a huge part too in how fast we get this stuff and what we get when.
We'll get to audience questions in a little bit, because I think everybody in the panel here has got some things to share.
There's something else also to consider, insurance.
I think that's going to be part of the cost, right? When you sign up for subscriptions.
Oh, I'm talking about something totally different.
Okay.
Okay, 2 robotic cars crash. Who's at fault? Who takes care of the injuries?
That'll all be recorded.
Yes, but I mean, still.
But ultimately, it's the software.
Yeah, it's
That
ultimately
costs
software.
If it's the same software, they're both Google cars, yeah, you've got a problem.
I mean, and then God forbid that you are one of these people who are tearing around like a mad fiend, like me, in an autonomous car, having a grand time. I mean, the whole industry of insurance is incredible. And think about the interesting tendrils that the car insurance industry has with government. Oh my gosh.
Well, I think the whole world of law and insurance and regulations and all of those things are currently changing because of lots of different changes in our society, driven by the fact that we put more of our trust into software, that we put more of our trust into automating anything. There's a huge new field in law for space law, because companies are looking at doing space mining in the next 20 years, and that's just a whole new thing that we need to figure out. So I think it's just going to require a lot of people to just put their nose down and try to figure out some transition that we can get to improve and adjust our regulations and policies for this new technology.
And actually, I'll tell you, law enforcement's one of the big drivers in some of this because they are such big consumers of vehicles and technology. I mean, all the deals that they have to buy, they buy fleets and fleets of cars.
As low a rate as I can, they buy the cheapest, crappiest cars they can.
They do, but I mean, one of the reasons that the Crown Vic is no longer made is they're like, we need this and this and this, so now they have other models. Some of them went to Dodge Charger, but the Interceptors, which are basically Ford Explorers, are the new car of choice for a lot of police departments for a lot of reasons, including room and other things. So, you know, I know from the research I did, those are, you know, they do have some pull with the industry to get what they need and want. You know?
Right. So I think I think the police, the law enforcement, and the whole security apparatus will love that. If they have a fugitive, they could go to the master grid and they can just push a button and they can say who's in what car, right? Because even if-
Very, very bad.
well, I know, but that's one of the things, because they're not looking at it, they're only looking at it in their own narrow way, and they can also say, okay, we can push another button and all the cars along this thoroughfare will just slow down and stop until we can go and apprehend this particular person. But on the other side of that is the propensity of people to take advantage of things. And despite all the technology available today, nobody has ever yet marketed a theft-proof car. Right? Nobody has done that yet. So how can we think that this system is going to be secure against, who knows? You know, how are they going to do that? And to me, one of the things of the unforeseen consequences of technology is distracted driving and cell phones.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that was a problem?
Yeah.
More people are getting killed now from distracted driving than through DUIs.
Yeah.
That's a bigger threat to you on the highway, somebody checking their playlist or that. And who would have thought of that? I mean that was an unforeseen consequence. No, everybody thought, well, nobody's gonna do that when they drive, and it's happening more and more. So anyway,
Two observations.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Number one, when your car freezes up, how the hell do you reboot it in the middle of I-25? Number two, if you want to know the effect of unions, unions are dying institutions.
No, I agree.
Look at Detroit, unions did that.
Yeah.
So I don't think unions are going to be much of a concern.
Eventually, but I mean, in that particular industry, they're still, you know.
Oh, yes, but they are so backward, they have
Oh, I don't disagree with you on that. I'm just.
Nothing gets done on Fridays, nothing gets done on Mondays.
Yeah.
Mondays, because it's like a Russian situation. Mondays, everybody's hungover.
It's true.
Friday, everybody's headed for an early weekend. And it's so corrupt.
Oh, it's.
And as a consequence, the real productive car industry has moved to the south.
Well, the interesting sort of thought experiment that we've not really brought up yet is the morality of AI. That's going to be a huge problem for these companies, because if they're putting in, you know, no-win Kobayashi Maru scenarios for a car to have to make a decision at some point to save a school bus or to save the driver, you know, who's at fault? How do they make that decision? Do you save more lives? Do you preserve the life of the driver? And software is going to have to make those decisions. And
That's
sometimes
cyber socialism.
yeah, and
Well-
we need to, you know, and it's a huge risk too for companies, that I think why people are so hesitant to move forward in this direction, because, you know, again, God forbid there's an accident, family members of the people involved may try to sue the company for, you know, their involvement in the accident, and, you know, there's
So
so
there has to
many.
be protections they have to think about, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many proverbial minefields that I think it's why this industry is sort of taking baby steps.
The other issue that we haven't talked about that's very important, and this is an issue we should all be concerned about, and another thing I've done in my research, cybersecurity. Folks, now that this exists and GPSs exist, if you want cybersecurity, get rid of this, get off the internet, disconnect your computer. That's the only way to really be secure, because you can have a certain level of security, but it's the privacy, it's gone. It's gone. And it's going more and more. And the more the police and military and government and other people rely on this technology, the less privacy and security you have. And you either have to learn to live with that, if you run like hell.
How about an app
Go ahead.
that consistently tells lies to these hackers?
Yeah.
The who? The what?
To the government people.
Yeah, an application that consistently tells lies to anybody who tries to get in. Oh, you're breaking into the phone of Rutger Hauer. And
Yeah.
he's going to come and cut you in half for this.
Well, there are some people that have made some apps like that, but here's the other problem. Police operate with systems of traffic cameras that don't just give tickets, but keep track of where vehicles are so they can monitor traffic flow and issues and also find cars. When I was riding along with the police, they also had a system up there that would identify anything that might be a gunshot and tell you where it is within
That doesn't
seconds.
work, it turns out.
It turns out it works only sometimes, but my point is, these are the kind of technologies they have that help them do their job more effectively and quickly, and at the same time, affect our privacy.
The traffic lights have been ruled unconstitutional.
I know, yeah.
And cities have been ordered to get rid of them and disobeyed. Well, traffic lights can be defeated with a rotating corner reflector on your roof.
Interesting.
You send the light right back to the camera and it's blinded.
You know, sometimes, though, that's considering obstruction of justice. depending on the-
No, not against.
Not if they're illegal.
Well, I know, but then you get the lawyers involved. Anyway, you had something to add.
Yeah, something else to consider. Let's say that all of these objections, the technical ones, and some of the philosophical ones, have been figured out. Okay. What do we do when a terrorist fires off an EMP? Everything goes flat. And the only people on the road would be the people with the cars that are pre-computer, carbureted cars.
Or potentially if somebody built a garage under a mountain where it was really, the EMP didn't.
Yeah, you always park your car in a garage that happens to be a Faraday cage.
Right.
Why don't not make the car a Faraday cage?
There you go. I hadn't thought of
This
that.
hotel's a pretty good place.
Especially the elevator.
No, but I'm gonna say take the opposite tack, is that when these cars are available, and you're gonna look at it and you're gonna say, you know what? The subscription service to this is probably a quarter of me paying for a car payments, insurance, I don't have to worry about parking, and you're gonna try the service, and holy cow, the car arrives when I want it. I can get work done on my way to where I want to go. If I want to drive to Albuquerque, I can go and relax the whole time with friends and not drive, and you're going to say, this is awesome.
Your medical stress will go down, some of your medical bills will go down, your health can go up, potentially if you not have to deal with stress of driving and traffic.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot, there are positives.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that we are kind of dwelling on the negatives, but even so, that does not mean the negatives will go away.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Am I the only person in this room that's fucking sick and tired of being ruled? Because this is a design for even further rule for the state to watch every step we take. I mean, it's like a Sting song.
Well, I see exactly what you're getting at, and in fact, I point out, because of this cell phone, we're under more surveillance than they are in 1984. And we buy into it. We know that. Everywhere we go, and people are like, I mentioned to somebody that, the NSA is listening to phone calls, and she says, well, if that means I get 4 bars or better, that's all right. We're wasting our time as long as I can get a good signal,
Not that interesting of a
The other thing is, the level of technology that we have in the public compared to what the military and the government has, you see these shows like, Person of Interest and these different things. There's a lot of technology out there that they have. And the police have technology too that can find and identify things in levels that we can't conceive of on a consumer level yet.
There needs to
And
be
so,
a national committee to examine each and every aspect of this technology on the basis of its constitutionality.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I don't know if that's ever gonna happen, that's a problem.
Okay.
I'll make it happen.
Okay, well, you have something to say?
No, it's okay. I wanted to, before, so we don't run out of time, I would like to go on to further future
Sure, I was
stuff
gonna
and,
go
like,
at
okay.
the flying cars.
Yeah,
The
flying cars,
and
yeah,
all that.
absolutely, because all this stuff we're talking about will result in a lot of congestion, to be honest. I have a hefty commute and I sit in traffic for the whole time. And, if I can sit there and, do some work, that's great. But I think we are gonna have to, regulations, government, all that aside, flying car technology,
Okay.
Flying machines
How
take
far?
up a lot more room than machines on the road. You have to, what do they consider, the airlines consider near miss? That's when another airplane comes within half a mile of you, or so, and
But they can cross a half mile really fast.
yeah,
Well, that's why the half mile is such an important warning marker,
Yeah.
because within seconds you could be right into each other.
yeah, so if we have flying cars, they're gonna take up vastly more room than they do on the highways.
Yeah,
Depends on how fast they fly.
Yeah,
Well,
they're-
you're gonna have to decide what levels, and then there's levels for low-flying planes, there's levels for cars going this way, that way, where you're offering. It's really quite a bit more complicated than just let's have flying cars. There's so many. What are we gonna do with the existing roadways? Are we gonna replace them? How are those cars gonna get on there? Does it just take off from your yard like Back to the Future and just fly away?
And who owns that space? Because you can buy airspace around your house.
That's true, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what about in the big cities where you've got the tall buildings? Does they have to raise the highway up over them, or are they gonna go around them?
Don't worry about the space, actually, the government will steal it for you.
Yeah, eminent domain on your air.
You had a question earlier, and I want to give you an opportunity.
The subject was already covered as
one that kind of like ties into, I guess a secondary one that kind of ties in with like the blind woman who was in here earlier, that she talked about like the difficulty that she as a CNI dog had, like having to listen to traffic, and like noticed that electric cars that they're like very noticeably silent, and like especially I was with my dad at Pikes Peak Hill Climbing. They had an electric car that it had to have a siren on it in order to so it could be heard by the pedestrians, and even that was like the Doppler effect was like maybe like barely noticeable. So it's like that would be like
That's unintended consequences, yeah, everybody says, oh, quiet car, that's awesome, but then there's people that need that sound.
My friend owns nothing but electric cars in Portland, and when I went to visit, he's like, here's our extra car, you can drive it. So it's the first time I'd ever driven an electric car.
Yeah.
And it took me a bit to realize that nobody could hear me.
Yeah.
Nobody knew I was coming, so I started to drive slower and be more careful because of the crosswalks, because I went downtown, and I basically took myself to all the places they shoot grandma on my own little tour, which was fun, but they shot everywhere. And to Powell's and various places, and I was like, I'm not sure this is such a good idea, because, the crosswalk people had they'd look at me going, oh, there's a car there, they had no idea. So I can imagine what a blind person or a dog
Or someone
trained to
with
respond to certain
someone with a
sounds.
cell phone.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
just,
In our own as drivers too, we have some sort of safety, like, okay, my car is working because I can hear it. I just got a car, it's like a super old, not expensive. It was a 2003 Civic Hybrid. I didn't even know Civic made hybrids in 2003, but they did.
Yeah.
And one of the things it does is it turns off the engine when I come to a complete stop. Freaked me out the first time I came to a stop, and the car just turned off, and I'm sitting there in silence, and cars are rumbling next to me, and I'm like, is this gonna start again?
Yeah, my
It's
stuff.
not.
The electric car was like that too. Every time I started it, I was like, okay, let me put it in gear and just give it a little gas and see if it's actually on. I can't tell. I
Giving
can't
you
tell.
gas, you say.
Well, no, I mean, just
Yeah,
push
I
the accelerator pedal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, give it gas.
Give it a little power. Give it a little power.
I am actually a truck driver out of Budweiser, so
Okay.
I could talk about this for hours, but my opinion on this whole self-driving,
Yeah.
you'd have to have every car be self-driving or it wouldn't work, because people don't follow the laws.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I've been driving for over a year now, and some of the idiots on the road.
Oh, they're.
You mean some. There's a lot.
You're describing a tiny part.
Yeah, and of course, every truck driver I've talked to hates the Bendix system where it slows you down. And because you end up slowing down when you're going up a hill
Oh, that's
And-
a disaster.
with 80,000 pounds and gears and So basically, it seems like you have to do every car all at once.
That's interesting because, that's another thing that the police are telling me, that their speeds are monitored now. They can't drive as fast as they used to. It's a safety thing and a liability thing for the department. That's all monitored. Imagine if we have the technology in these cars to say, this person's going too fast, we're just gonna cut off the speed limit for them and slow them down. I mean, all of these things are possibilities.
Not far from that. I use Waze when I'm driving to avoid if there's an accident or something, and it tracks how fast I'm going. And
Yeah.
what's
Well,
to stop it from sending a report,
My GPS does that too.
Yeah.
It says, oh, you're speeding, or you're not speeding, or whatever,
Yeah, you have a question?
I can see just a couple of flies in the ointment already. First of all, the older cars, the self-driving cars versus the autonomous cars. Remember that story, X marks the pedwalk, where the two groups, the pedestrians and the cars, are actually coming to shooting blows. Everybody will say we have to get every unself-driving car off the road for the children, for safety, for security. And the rest of us will dig in. I'm sorry, I don't trust your machine. I want to be able to go where I want to. I have a 70 Dodge Dart, and that car will probably outlive me, and the two of us are going to go down together.
Well, see, but they could say you have to pay, what they'll do is you have to pay a special tax for that.
Then
say no.
Yeah.
Then the other line is that until we solve the fuel problem, flying cars are a wonderful thought, but if you're trying to get there on gasoline, you think your average car burns gas now. Wait until you try a virtual takeoff and try to have a range out at all.
We got one question there, and then I want you to just elaborate on your flying car thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Okay, so what about me and my camper trailer? How am I gonna, be able to do that? And it's the same problem. People are crazy. They do not understand that you've got all that mass And
Absolutely.
you've got to be able to do something about it. So I agree, I'm not certain that I am willing to, one, would there be a car that would be able to pull my little Can-Am camper, not to mention those big fifth wheels. So there's an issue there, and I'm not sure that I would trust it.
You know, it could be that whoever's doing this will have exceptions to that. They might say that is a problem that is too difficult for us to solve, so there'll be vehicles for that. And they might be able to interface, for example, they have a module, they'll communicate with all the other vehicles, so it'll coordinate with them.
Don't pull right in front of me, because I can't stop that.
Well, I think that will be addressed, because I did, and what about people who live in rural areas? You know, you're gonna.
No, but I think it won't be addressed as long as there's people who are driving their own cars, basically with driving cars. Because the person who's in self-control of their car can just do that and pull in front of the, and not leave them in the room. I don't ever pull in front of a truck or a camper. I will signal and I'll drive in this other lane and wait for them to flash their lights at me, and that's what I know I'm saying.
Well,
A lot of people don't do that.
This is what I think they'll do. They'll say, look, you will have to pay an extra $100 a year, or else you could put this little module in your regular car, and that module will connect your car to everybody else. So the whole system, the grid knows where you are, basically.
Yeah, no, I get
So
you.
however you drive, it'll make allowances, all the other cars there. So you're not an empty spot in that. So anyway, you go, flying cars.
Well, so I'm like an idealist in the future, and I just want to live in Starfleet, so that's basically where I want to go. But I think with flying cars, the technology that we need to produce is basically vertical takeoff. That's kind of the biggest thing, because there's no way we can have runways to get vertical. That's just impractical from a full
The
standpoint.
eighth ray of Barstow.
Yeah.
So take off like a helicopter, basically.
Basically, yeah, but then, when you see sort of futuristic films and stuff, basically they just have those like jet engines that are vertically take off. I don't want to stand near one of those. That's super loud and super hot and would destroy the heck out of my garage.
Or your lawn.
Or your lawn, exactly. So I think the vertical takeoff technology is something we need to figure out. But there's interesting stuff that people do in terms of, people are now exploring ways to use sonic technology to as a power source. I don't know if any of you saw, there's a really cool video of using sound waves as fire extinguishers, because you can create, you have compressed air and then you sort of have a relaxation of air pressure. And so you basically just lower the air pressure really fast with a sonic wave, and that extinguishes a flame. And so I think we can sort of start to explore more out-of-the-box ways, but the biggest number one thing we need to solve from a technology standpoint is the vertical takeoff.
Well,
There are sonic wave things used as security.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I saw on the Science Channel, which is what I put on when I was sleeping. They had some people with fairly large drones, and a girl hanging on 2 ropes from them, and steering them by shifting her body weight on what you're
Gee,
saying.
that sounds familiar.
So there's the very beginning of your dream. I actually have been very encouraged. I saw a TARDIS flying, and what it was a hollow, thin box with a quadcopter inside. And they would tip it over, and then it would use the flats as airfoils. So it's coming. That kind of thing is coming. I don't know how it'll be done. This gentleman, I'm sorry to single you out, but your solution to everything seems to be imposing fees without any due process of law, and that's going to stop.
Well, I mean, do you get, every time they give you a fee, or it's not a fee, the fee is, that's the work on a tax.
I mean, it's definitely how the government thinks, but whether or not it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Taxation without representation is wrong. Taxation.
Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna argue with that, I'm just saying that's the way they do things.
Well, they're going to be stopped. They're going to be stopped. They're in the process of being stopped. Now, why do you think that we have Donald Trump, for God's sake?
Oh, here we go.
You know.
Well, we'll give you a little bit on that. Okay,
I'm
I'm
just
not gonna disagree with you anything at all, but I think I want to keep the focus on.
I'm just saying that he would not be where he is if people weren't fed up with fees and taxes and regulations.
I'm not gonna disagree with you.
I was just going to say the sonic thing. When I did some work with prisons,
They use that for crowd control.
they use it for crowd control, and they also use it for security. If you break the sonic waves, then an alarm goes off. So, I mean, I think sonic waves, not in addition to the vertical thing you're talking about, could be a way for the cars to use to sense space around them.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
There's some ways that
Well,
would be very
it's
helpful.
like radar and LiDAR.
Right, exactly. So there's all kinds of interesting science that can become part of this, which I think is really cool.
So you tell us about, okay, you jump in. Share something. You've been, I wanna-
Well, I've been absorbing all of this wonderful stuff. I don't think I'm gonna see it in my lifetime.
Flying car?
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't think it'll happen because of some of the simple fact of technology, and this is where this young lady will probably make $1 billion when she comes up with anti-grav. Something with anti-grav, well, I don't know how that will be accomplished. I don't know how it will be powered, which there's going to be a power something in there. Anti-grav cars then have the vertical liftoff issue. And they may even have a force field issue to prevent bumping up against each other. Or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, think of it as an invisible roll cage. You know, gee, you know, what a shot coming for me. And all this stuff. I mean, I could see that happening, but
What about hover cars? Do you think hover cars, I mean, I think hover cars are gonna be one of the first things we see. I mean, I've seen some individual people who built hover cars that are pretty amazing, that kind of do things. I've also seen cars that can drive on the street and then go be boats that people have built. It's not a big thing, it's not widely available, but I've seen it.
Well, and like the boat car, everything's a compromise.
Sure.
And the boat cars are lousy boats and lousy cars.
Yep,
You know,
they are.
that's the
Well,
problem with.
They are, but that doesn't mean that technology can't grow and change if somebody actually focused on it, right?
Well,
now
I
it's
mean,
just
they have,
individual
the
people.
military, like in World War II, they had the ducks, which
Well,
were
they did.
amphibious trucks.
Actually, we're-
And they actually don't have any more ducks anymore because there's,
they kept them all in a row.
yeah. And because that technology now has been supplanted by either the big giant hovercraft landings or helicopters. Just take the material directly from the ship and put it on land and not have to take it in these trucks. You had a question?
And, I guess one additional problem with the flying cars or hover cars is that the ability to stop is they would be dealing with less friction, like a car that's on the ground can deal with friction, like
With tires and road and
Yeah, the brakes.
it would just deal with
Please
air.
plug my first novel.
Go ahead, go
The
ahead.
vehicles in my first novel, The Probability Approach, are all hovercraft. And I have addressed each and every one of these problems.
Like going uphill?
Yes, like going uphill. And so read The Probability Approach, and I won't give away the secrets because there's no profit in that. And you'll see that these things have been anticipated. I wrote that book starting in 1977. So these are not insurmountable problems. And as far as convertibility goes, I agree with you that there used to be something in Loveland called Amphicar. And it was a bad little car and a bad little boat. But a hovercraft is not changing its mode of operation.
No,
It's the same.
When it's on the land and on the water.
and that's where I think.
And
that-
they have
yeah.
very, very successful giant hovercraft that run around the English, the British Isles like the Isle of Wight and stuff like that in Jersey. So, and that's a proven technology. Those machines have been running for.
The only thing is hovercraft are smooth terrain vehicles. I mean, the military tried them like in Vietnam and stuff, and they're great on water, they're great on swamps, but once you get into rough terrain, they just don't work.
As I said, these problems have been
Solid use.
examined and addressed. Read my book.
Okay. All right, yes, sir.
Commenting about hovercraft in terms of it may work very well as a large vehicle for around the Isle of Wight and things like that, where you have wide open spaces and no traffic. Okay, what happens when you're driving across Kansas and you have a 70-mile crosswind? Blow it off the
You
road.
just have to have,
You
the
have to
same
do-
thing an airplane has, sufficient power to resist the wind.
And you don't have to be on the road, see?
That's the
the beauty.
whole
You don't have
issue
to
winds
be-
up being, is your infrastructure is winds up just going out of sight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're also very noisy, and they're also very
Very windy.
noisy and windy, and they use a lot of
Traffic congestion is the problem I was referring to in terms of, okay, one vehicle is not a problem. What happens if you have, I-70? It don't work.
Well, on I-70, you run 300 miles an hour. And so you're on the road much less time, and there are many fewer vehicles at any given time on the road. I calculated all these things when I wrote this particular book.
Your power requirements go up dramatically in
Power's
terms of.
free.
Power's free?
We're living in the dark ages right now.
I'm sorry, you haven't got the technology to back it up right now. You won't have it for another 50 years.
That's
Even
not
then,
true.
it's going
That's
to
not
be
true.
resisted by the power companies.
Screw them.
Okay,
No, that sounds
yeah,
good.
all right, 5 minutes, anybody else have a question? Yes, Budweiser,
Yes,
lady.
yes. Sorry, I have a quick question about, because I walked in a minute late. You were saying everyone would use this service to get the cars, and this includes hover cars, because they'd send out a car or a hover car or whatever to you. And it'd be easier and faster to get the hover car to you. But it's like, couldn't you just buy your own? It seems like our American culture, consumer culture, we would want to buy our own vehicle.
Well, see, what has happened lately is like, you have like, here in Denver, you have Car2Go, those small ones, you have an Uber and you have Lyft. You also have like enterprise car share. And a lot of people make the decision is like, why do I need to pay like for a nice car, $30,000-$40,000 a year, all those car payments and insurance and everything, where there is this options for me that every time I need to get from here to there.
Not really in rural areas like
Yeah,
that.
see, that was the point I was going to point out, is that like in a town like mine, there's 13,000 people, or even some cities that don't have good public transportation systems. In our culture, if you do not have a car, you are severely handicapped. In these small towns that will never have the public transportation system, people are just gonna want their own vehicles.
Well, I don't
I
know
mean,
that.
you know, yeah, but you know, like, I remember when I was married and living in St. Louis, my wife got frustrated because I only had one car. I took it because I was making more money and she was working less hours, and we lived near a metro link, but even then, she'd have to catch several buses when she did these temp jobs to go different places. It could take her hours to get to work.
Yeah.
And because she was working on the opposite side of town from me, I couldn't just take her. So it was, you know, it became a real problem and frustration for her and for me. So I just think the problem is we've got two worlds. We've got the rural world, the people without the public transportation, and people with. These changes might come sooner to places like Denver and Seattle and things, and LA, but you know, getting everybody else to come along is also going to be an issue.
Well, yeah, it's the whole density.
I didn't ride a bus till I was 20.
Yes, sir, yeah.
How do you school?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So me then? Okay. I was gonna say, where do you think trends like boosted boards and such will go into this? I think we're gonna see a lot of single-person transportation vehicles. If they lift the restriction, or for those to go over 30 miles per hour, I think you're gonna see a lot of people go toward like, I'm gonna get my own little transportation system myself. I would go away from cars. You know, yeah, different little scooters and such. I think they're a lot more efficient for that, and in urban environments, they may be a bit safer if we give them their own lane.
Impact. Motorcycles are much dirtier than cars.
No, I'm talking about like boosted boards, or like the like the types of scooters we have today, like the electric scooters and such.
Oh, okay.
They use a lot more. They use a lot less resources, a lot less space. I think eventually, if we can lift the restrictions on things like boosted boards, you'll see a lot of people just using single-person transport vehicles instead of going with like a general car or something that's more expensive.
When the weather's nice.
Well,
And when you don't have a bunch of kids.
But until we get clean power, which I was in the power industry for a long time, working for a coal company, until we get clean power, I think your electric cars are going to be as or more pollution oriented, or electric scooters, because the more electricity we need for our vehicles, we've got to make the electricity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my objections to the electric cars. They're talking about clean technology. Whether one is you're just pushing off where the energy comes from, and on top of that, it's the energy grid. Nobody talks about that. Is that you got this car, and everybody's going to come home at the same time and plug it in at the same time.
Huge surge.
Huge surge. And then who do they want to pay for that?
I've got a great story about that, actually, because there's evidence in the UK. They have to buy power from France during EastEnders when there's a break, because literally everyone goes and puts the kettle on, and there's a huge surge in the power in the UK. Like, actually, that requires them to get more energy from somewhere else. And that would be exactly, so we do already see that, but I think we might be able to.
Okay, any last comments? Yes, sir.
There's just one thought is like, I guess that if dealing with flying cars, that like, that probably fall under the domain of needing an FAA license as opposed to a driver's license. Since those are more difficult to get, it could bring down the potential for accidents down a little bit, but of course the human factor probably not entirely. But,
I think the best show that really gives us a glimpse of the flying cars has to be the Jetsons.
Yeah.
You know, and then they still have gridlock. And they have the certain lanes yet, you know, and then of course people have buttonitis instead of
Yeah.
carpal tunnel syndrome.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I thought that was good.
I want that car from Tom and Jerry in that one episode where we dress you and do all those things. And take you to work.
Yeah. Okay, we're at the end of our time. Thank you very much for coming today.